Hey, welcome to Violent Minds. I'm Mark Chauppetta, your nationally known private investigator, and this handsome gentleman next to me is
Dr. Keith Ablow. So
Hey.
forensic psychiatrist, former Fox News contributor, a lot of formers in my life, but it's okay. Now there's a current co-host of Violent Minds.
Yeah, right. And we could probably sit here for about an hour of this show and run through all your credentials if you want to.
We could, but let's skip that and get right to the Long Island serial killer.
Yeah, but I don't want to get right to that. First of all, I'd like to, let the audience get to know who we are a little bit, because this is in its infancy, this show, Violent Minds.
Well, that's true.
Yes. And people are, people may know you, but people don't necessarily know me, but they don't know us together. So as this show goes along, and each and every episode, we're going to kind of tackle subjects that have a violent theme to them, whether it's a serial killer or cage fighting or just something, violent type behavior. And I'm going to put my spin on it. Dr. Keith Ablow is going to put his spin on it, and we're going to have some fun going back and forth, kind of getting to know each other. So
there you go. Yeah, and I mean, look, I mean, when you're dealing with this kind of darkness, well, it's good to have you here because you're fairly dark as a human being. No, I'm just kidding. But when really, we're applying two different lenses, right? Yes. So it's the psychological and the investigative, right? And so we like to say two heads are better than one, but
yes,
really, we're talking about things that are seemingly unfathomable. Why would people do certain things?
I ask myself that all the time. Why do people do certain things, and why do people have certain types of behaviors? And especially in my line of work as a criminal defense investigator mainly, and as a licensed investigator here in Mass, the majority of my work comes from the other side. I don't work for the police or the prosecution. I'm dealing pretty much one-on-one with that violent mind, with the rapist, with the murderer, with the wife beater or husband beater or whatever you want to call it. So, oftentimes I sit there when I'm interviewing them, and I'm asking myself, when I'm doing an intake or I'm investigating a certain case, like, why would you do this? And what brought you to these levels to do certain things? And as a man, I can kind of understand certain things, and I believe we had a guest on one of our other shows, Andrew Mckenna, that kind of touched on that a little bit, as far as understanding, especially if you're going through a tough situation, maybe a probate and family situation, or something that really tears on your heartstrings, how you can go to those depths that you never thought you could go to before.
Well, the how and the why is sort of my world, right? And I've never been stumped. There's never been, and it's not me, it's the way people operate, the way the human mind operates. Even though things seem unthinkable or unfathomable, they're neither, right? Because in fact, if you have the chops and the desire to go deeper and get into the minds of people who've done horrible things, you just find people who've had their empathy crushed and therefore have no empathy for others, or any other number of paradigms. But I've never felt like, oh, I just can't see why this would have happened. It always feels like there's a locomotive running down the tracks, and you're like, this is going to end badly. And of course, you're looking in retrospect. So some people might say to me, look, Keith, come on, you're trying to fit the puzzle pieces in, but you've got some kind of a paint by number set. Not really. I mean, all this stuff is so captivating and so gripping and makes so much sense that you say, yeah, it's hard to refute that that's what happened to this person.
But before we get into the Long Island, serial killers or killer or whatever it might be, or
I like that.
Right, Long Island murders. I want to ask you a question. I was thinking of you the other day. Well, first of all, I have two questions. Do you like my new glasses?
I'm not a huge fan.
No?
I mean, you look Gandhi-ish. I feel as
Yeah.
though
John Lennon-ish, maybe?
I'm going to stick with Gandhi for the purposes of this particular podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, but you know, you get kind of a Ben Kingsley look, which isn't bad as you get a little older.
Well,
Yeah.
I've been searching for a new look lately. So my wife and I went out last night with some friends. We met them for dinner, and it was a little chilly last night here in Massachusetts. And she got me this really cool jumpsuit, Rocky jumpsuit from
Okay.
I don't know if it was Rocky 4, I think, but it's back when the one that was shot in the 80s, and the whole 80s Rocky film with Chicago was just kind of an anomaly. Like the 80s itself were an anomaly. And it's just like real Guido jumpsuit, tracksuit, I like to call it. And I put it on last night to go out, and she was like, get back in the room and change.
Yeah, there you go.
So I'm trying
an actual facsimile of the Rocky jumpsuit.
Yeah,
or tracksuit or whatever.
He sells it on his website. Yeah. So I've been trying to go for the Rocky look, but
very nice.
Another question I had for you, and I was thinking of you, and this is a serious question. My wife and I 2 weeks ago spent a night at Mohegan Sun, which is a casino here for everyone in Connecticut. And we go once in a while. We're not big gamblers, but we'll spend the night out. We'll play some slot machines. It's kind of one of those things where I do it to keep the wife happy. And it always blows my mind. And I hate to judge as a parent, but why do parents bring their kids to casinos? Like, I just see that as so negligent as a parent. Now, I don't know if you've done that when your kids were little, but is it?
That's where their daycare was, actually. No, just kidding.
Is it addiction?
And they're thriving. No,
right? But is it addiction? Is it like, I'm like, why? Like, I want to go to a casino for the night, and I don't want to see kids running through the hallway. They can't go into the casino area, but they're in the pool, and I don't know. It just blows my mind as a really
strange. It's strange.
I think it's addiction, don't you think?
I think it's probably either addiction or kind of, maybe it could be one thing or the other. It could either be, look, these are people who are so addicted that they can't like separate the family. They've got to go for the gambling. Or it could be that the gambling's so meaningless to them in a way that this is like going to the mall. Right.
That set a tone, and that foundation,
sure,
the foundation years. But then my wife said to me, she said, Mark, Dave, what do you think Dave and Buster's is? We're grooming kids at Dave and Buster's, to, I guess, prep themselves for actually adult gambling.
Sure. Same at Chuck E. Cheese was the same thing. Things would spin. It's probably all owned by the gaming industry, as is the state of Massachusetts, probably owned by the gaming industry, since, the lottery, but that's in every state. The lottery is basically the same thing. You're in line, you're like, your kids are seeing people, take a chance. That's the gambling, by the way, that I think makes sense. I don't understand people who don't buy lottery tickets, like just the one for Megabucks, say.
Yeah.
If you can part with $2, you may as well walk around thinking it's idiocy. It's stupid. But hey, I'm in like everybody else. If I win $100 million, wouldn't that be fun?
Right.
You might as well. I mean, especially if you're not going to make 100 million any other way, like we're not going to make 100 million any other way, probably. So, so there you go.
I mean, I'm not disappointed in you right now, but, as a gentleman with multiple degrees.
Yeah.
I thought I'd get a little bit more of a deeper answer as to why people take kids to casinos, but I'm okay with it.
There you go. It's I think people are fairly resourceful. And so if you give them, they're built that way, right? So in other words, it's not here's what I've learned. Just, I feel like I've got grasshopper here. You can leave when you take the pebble from my hand. Here's what I've learned. There are no accidents. If you see people with their kids at casinos, the reason for that is that people paid $1 zillion in terms of marketing and design, have decided we're going to design the casino such that when people come, they think, I could bring my kids here.
Right.
And right? It's all a gaffe.
They're not thinking about the betterment of a child. Nobody is. So
No, they're thinking, listen, let's put the ice cream thing in here, and then
yeah,
also let's make the countertop low enough so that kids can see through the glass.
let's
You
have a
want to
kiddie
bring it,
pool. Let's have a kiddie pool, and you know, and then
yeah.
you know. So I wasn't sure if it was that, Doc Keith, or if it was that I'm just turning into, my wife calls me Walt Kowalski. I'm just, you know, get off my lawn, you know, the Clint Eastwood character from Gran Torino, where I'm just becoming just old and uptight and bitter. And
I can see you probably want a grittier environment.
yeah,
Yeah, something that maybe this doesn't bring out sort of that. So you're going there perhaps saying, I want something to be edgy.
yeah,
Like we're going gambling, for God's sake. And you end up in the equivalent of like Chuck E. Cheese, but
without a
real
ball
money,
pit.
right? The kids are going to want to buy tickets. Pretty soon they'll have that. They'll have kiddie gambling for tickets at the casino, because any way that we can make money from our kids or anyone else, the state will sanction anything that raises tax dollars.
Right, right. I hear you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyways,
Right.
let's talk a little bit about our subject today. And, you know, those that are viewing this and those that are viewing Violent Minds going forward, for the most, we're going to try to bring some really interesting guests in once we kind of get our sea legs. And, you know, for the time, you're going to see a lot of shows that are split in two parts, which is going to be really cool, because I know a lot of people out there, including myself, you know, have a short attention span. You know, so you know,
Absolutely.
you get 30 minutes, you know. I mean, we're not Joe Rogan, who does 4-hour shows, for Christ's sake. You know, we're
Sure.
we're trying to do the Cliff Notes version of entertainment here. So you had brought up the Long Island serial killer or killers. I know there's been a lot of theories bounced out there. I remember it from the news. I'm not sure, and you can you know, I guess explain to me what your experience with it is, or if you actually worked on it, or if you have a closer expertise to it other than what I've seen on the news or on specials. But really a crazy phenomenon, especially back then when Craigslist kind of became part of our world, and became a way to market, or it became a front for illegal activity.
Right.
You know, yeah, you can buy you know, a used sofa, but you could also get a blowjob on
Yeah.
that used sofa.
Right. And people were, you know, posting sex for sale on Craigslist. I think probably they still do. I don't know. It used to be Backpage. There was Backpage.com,
Yep.
Craigslist,
Mm-hmm.
and there are other sites.
Mm-hmm.
The trouble is that just like, you know, you go to a casino, you don't know whether professional gamblers are going there or amateurs or anyone else. You're going with money though. So you think, well, wow, I wonder whether people in the parking lot, maybe you'll be a little bit more careful in the parking lot or leaving there if you're walking away from a casino.
Mm-hmm.
There was this serial killer trolling. There is this serial killer trolling women who were advertising sex on Craigslist, which you know,
Mm-hmm.
and disposing of their, you know, horribly disfigured bodies
Mm-hmm.
along the shores in Long Island, in the various locales in Long Island, in marshes and so forth. And there's someone incarcerated actually who may be
Linked
the
to
Long
it.
Island. Maybe the Long Island serial killer seems linked to it, has killed 2 women before. A couple of victims were found near his home. And so you start to think, is it in fact that fellow? By the way, as an investigator, if you were not the Long Island serial killer and you're already doing 50 years, as this guy's doing, he's doing 50 years, and
Yep.
he cut their legs, horrible stuff.
Remembered him.
Dismembered these women. If you're not that guy, then why wouldn't you say, give me a polygraph, give me 10 polygraphs, I'll pass 9 of them anyhow. So, and you're already doing 50 years.
Right.
Do you think that the folks that are doing 50 years think, yeah, but anything could happen? I mean, maybe I'll get some sort of commutation of my sentence. Maybe I'll escape. I'm not going to make my situation worse.
Right.
What do you think?
Maybe there's some status behind it, some jail cred or something, going on here. I'm not sure. I mean, it all began back in 2010 when Shannon Gilbert, I believe is her name, disappeared. Pretty girl,
Right.
Prostitute from New Jersey, had been busted in New Jersey for prostitution, had a handler, and he's someone that was questioned as well. So she started moving into Manhattan and, working in that area. And whoever was trolling the back pages or trolling Craigslist on this particular case, we think met up with her. And when they went looking for her, that's when they stumbled on all these other bodies along the shore, and they called it what was it called? The Gilday 4, I believe, because they had found 4 bodies while they were looking. Gilgo 4, I think they were called. While they were looking for these two, this young lady, they found these other 4 people, and were able to match DNA records with these other girls and find out who they were and who their families were and how long they'd been missing. And it was I remember it was in the winter time. And and things were they were kind of waiting for the overgrowth to kind of foliage to kind of go away.
Right.
So they could get the bloodhounds out there and able to track other bodies. But I mean, whoever did this, and you can speak more, and this is less about, I guess, these particular crimes and more about the mind of a serial killer. Whoever did this had to have been somewhat sophisticated. They knew how to use Craigslist. They had to have had common knowledge of that area. We're talking that stretch there in Long Island and Suffolk County was a gated community.
Yeah.
The area that the bodies were dumped was a pretty dark, long, shore road. I don't know if it was protected land or not. Certainly wasn't developed. So, what creates a mind to be able to do this stuff, Doctor? Like, where does it begin? Where do you begin to say, what, I want to, I want to accost and kill people? Is it a control thing? Is there a disconnect with the brain?
So, I think, first of all, I think that anybody who, quote, wants to kill people or is irresistibly drawn to killing people, even if they don't want to, quote unquote, don't want to, has been metaphorically killed in some manner, him or herself. Right. So they've experienced something like being completely overwhelmed and, quote, murdered, not physically, but something in their background has been unspeakable. I have not met any killers, and I've met plenty who had wonderful upbringings without any suffocating circumstances. So there's something that resonates with them about death and seeing it unfold. Like they're very, very, very distant cousins of people who have 6 marriages, right? And they keep thinking, I'm going to marry a different person next time. They marry the same person because there's something encoded psychologically in them where they're like, this is for me. This is for me. Same person. You keep trying to switch up the cards. You get dealt the same hand. Now, look, there's something incredibly addictive and compelling for these people about what? Watching life end. They know something about that. They're also, this guy's mixing it with sexual activity. So you start to think, is there something about that activity? Was this person abused in his or her childhood?
Was their mother a prostitute?
Was their mother a prostitute? You'd start to build the story. That's where you're doing like narrative thinking. What's the story? Was their mother, if not a prostitute, and this is how we would put stuff up on the board, right, in your office with the Post-it notes. If not a prostitute, perceived as a I've worked with people who harbor tremendous ill will toward moms who left their dads or were left by their dads, doesn't matter, and then brought in one date after another. They're not getting paid, but they bring in one date after another into the kid's life, and he sees them cycling through. Now that to that child growing up can become in an adult man's mind, my mother was a whore, was a prostitute, was a tremendous rage. So if I had a guess, this guy didn't have a home where there was, I would say, listen, let's prioritize in our suspect list people who were younger than age 15 when their parents split up, and the mother dated a lot or remarried several times, maybe.
But, you know, in this particular case here, you know, the Long Island serial killers, the first 4 bodies were found in bags. What were they called? Burlap.
Burlap. Yeah.
Right. So somewhat methodical, same pattern. And I think that's what led investigators, the police, to believe, obviously, it was these 4, at least, you know, the same person. Then months later, I think 3 or 4 more bodies were found, one being a male, and I think 3 more bodies were found, one being a male and one being a woman and a child were found. But the male, you ask yourself, well, that kind of goes against their theory and goes against the pattern of female. So now law enforcement's kind of getting confused here. But the Asian male was dressed in fishnet stockings.
Well, there you go.
And was probably posing
as a female.
And this killer got angry and bludgeoned the person. And I've been doing some research on serial killers. It's intriguing. And I guess serial killers evolve like everyone else evolves. They may start one way, and then they may just kill them and then not dismember them, but then later start dismembering them and going a different way. They mentally evolve as a killer.
It's like a fingerprint, right? I mean, they're getting more and more specific. Now, if I said to you as an investigator, I'll say it. Listen, okay, so if we presumed, let's look in the general geography of that environment where the bodies were found. I wanna think about men who may have had families that there were a number of marriages. Their mom had several marriages. Are you able to go back in some sort of, you'd have to have a series of suspects, right, in order to assess that. There's no way you're going to be able to target, even with today's sophisticated internet. If I have a story of who the guy is, there are only so many entry points, right, where you can say, all right, I'll target that.
Right. I mean, most homicides are that of people that they know. It's very rarely an unknown person, I guess, unless you're a serial killer. I know initially law enforcement questioned the Shannon girl, her handler, the handler. I guess in today's day, I guess that's a more PC way of calling a pimp.
Sure.
They questioned them. She ran up to a house.
Agent.
What's that?
Her agent. No, I'm just
her agent. Right. She ran up to a house, knocked on a door. Someone came out, helped her. She disappeared into the night. And 911 call. There was the gentleman that lived in this community that actually called in the prostitute.
It was cleared, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So he had called her. She ran out of her house, out of his house, like ranting and raving.
Yeah.
That was his story, though. She was making no sense. Yeah, I tried to hire her for sex, but she just was erratic and ran out of the house. And yeah, now she's dead, but I didn't do it. And he didn't.
Right.
Lo and behold, I mean, you'd think the cops would have thought we got him.
Right.
But
then there was this doctor on the island, Peter Hackett. He was like on the beach board, the unofficial mayor of this little beachfront community, and he came in contact with with Shannon Gilbert's handler, and he seemed to be a little bit sketchy.
Yeah.
And I know that he's been a suspect. He's been deposed many a times. So a lot of people think there might be some inside corruption, with law enforcement here.
Correct. Yeah,
Could be
because
someone walking amongst them. If they're online, they have a computer, they're smart, they know the area, they know the terrain, they know where to dump the bodies. They wouldn't have found these bodies if that girl didn't go missing in that area. That was pure luck.
So let me ask you this question. If and I pose it just for thought. So if you're an innocent person and you're being deposed several times in a potential serial killing, like I'd be out there all over the media. I'd be doing pay-per-view with polygraphs, saying, it isn't me.
Right.
But maybe these folks who were looked at, their lawyers said, listen, I know you'd love to do that. You'd love to get out there, but we're going to do this in a very disciplined way. I'm going to be there every time you're interviewed. You're not doing any polygraph. They can be mistaken. And so, for the people looking in from the outside, you might wonder, well, why would they be so reserved? These suspects are being, their lives are on the line.
Right. Right.
So, but maybe it's that. What do you?
I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Murder on the Cape. My bread and butter case I've been working on for 5-6 years. Krista Worthington, my client, Chris McCowan, and actually, I'm running on Fox Nation right now on an episode of Can You Solve It? I believe it's called, with Judge Janine. I'm on an episode called Krista Worthington. Got it. And shameless plug. But it reminds me of that case when it originally happened. I came into it obviously years later after Chris has been convicted, that they did a whole DNA dragnet. And that was it wasn't an island. It was the, Truro, Mass, Cape Cod, beachfront community. And they pretty much locked down the borders and made everyone give a DNA test. Got it. Yeah. Which is unprecedented, somewhat unconstitutional. And eventually was linked to our client, but you think maybe something like that, and I'm not sure, I'm not super familiar with the laws in New York City and how they approached it or how law enforcement handled it, but that's a real tight-knit area. Everyone knows everyone. It's a gated community, so if you're killing these women, these prostitutes, and you're dumping them off in there, you have to have access to that area, at least to be able to go into that area. Strangers can't. Right. So, and like I said, I'm fascinated. Like I look at the traits of a serial killer and I try to check them off to see if I meet any of those traits. The other thing that's interesting is this, obviously these killings stopped. They did. Right. And so, which goes in coincides with the gentleman you mentioned earlier, that's sitting in prison. Yeah. And it's hard to imagine. I mean, it is hard to imagine. It's sort of like in the Judge Kavanaugh. I don't know how we got to Judge Kavanaugh, but in the Judge Kavanaugh hearings, right? Yeah, that's true. Senator Graham said, as far as I know, you don't start raping women back in law school and then suddenly nothing. Right. Right. These are somewhat compulsive, addictive acts going back to your gambling problem. Yeah. Take a hiatus, you're saying. So you're saying that they don't take a hiatus. Maybe they would take a slight hiatus. Years, maybe try to fight the demons. But, this idea like, well, they do seem to stop when this guy's incarcerated takes me back to, hey,
what's your hope here? Why are you withholding, if it's you, why are you withholding the truth?
Right.
You know, and it does make me wonder what's in somebody's mind who is withholding, yeah, no, I killed those two that I'm convicted of. By the way, he still says, no, I didn't.
Well,
So
because there's
maybe
a
it's
chance,
that.
there's a chance of parole and there's a chance of seeing the light of day. You know, if you confess to these, then you're never going to see the light of day. And
Yeah,
and we know that people don't have, you know, they don't have compassion. They don't have empathy. So sitting in prison doesn't generally make those emotions all of a sudden become part of your personality.
most certainly not, unless there's a miracle, right? And